Joining us now on the John Fredericks Radio Network is former Virginia Governor Jim Gilmore. We are live today and tomorrow. We're in Clearwater, Florida. As you know, I'm here for 2 days as we expand our affiliate radio network base through Florida. And hopefully very soon we'll be heard in Tampa and Clearwater area. Working on that. I'll be here for 2 days. Beautiful weather today in Clearwater. Unlike Virginia, North Carolina, sure, and the greater metropolitan Washington area where, guess what? More clouds and more rain. Governor, great to have you. I'm in sunny Florida.
Great, John. I hope you're having a good time down there in sunny Florida.
Certainly better than being in the swamp, don't you think?
Well, D.C.'s still a swamp, and it seems to be expanding because of all this rain. But we're happy to have a little rain. It'll be okay.
Well, I'm tired of the rain, and I got to get some baseball in the weekend, so the heck with all this rain. Now, Governor, so much to talk about, sir, so little time. Let's go to Spygate. We just had Corey Lewandowski on. He kind of inferred that people were going to jail over this. I mean, look, I was at the campaign from the beginning. I never met Carter Page. He was not paid operative. I never met him. I never met George Papadopoulos. These were guys on a piece of paper. But now we find out this Professor Halpern. So this guy is paid by the FBI to spy on the campaign, and now the FBI's kind of changed their story. First they said, well, this was all started July 31st when Papadopoulos went to a bar in London. He got 3 sheets to the wind. He popped off about the Russians had dirt on Clinton. An Australian diplomat heard him. They tipped off the FBI. Then they had the dossier. Then they went to the judge. Then they got the surveillance. That's how it started. They had legit intel. Well, now we find out this guy Halpern was spying on the campaign before any of that happened. So why was he there, and what was that time frame? Have you ever seen anything like
John,
this in your life?
There's just 2 aspects of this, and there's only one that's really been discussed up to this point, and that is some suspicion that somehow the Trump campaign was colluding, that they were doing something to undermine the interests of the United States, that they were committing crimes. That's all been widely discussed, and that justifies all this spooky stuff that the FBI has been doing. But the other side of the coin is the part that has not been discussed at all. We'll discuss it for the first time here on the John Frederick Show, and that is that there's something kind of eerie about the federal government and its resources and its agencies spying on private individuals. If this were reversed and a Democrat or a Republican administration was spying on if a Republican administration was spying on a Democratic political campaign, they'd be screaming bloody murder. In fact, we've seen that kind of thing before. Spygate. The point is this. I think this. Robert Mueller is a good man, an honest man, and I think that he ought to be allowed to finish his investigation and present that to the people. But the problem is he's ignorant of something. He's not aware of something. And that is, after a year, it's beginning to look creepy. The Star Chamber's secret investigation, and they applaud him because he keeps everything so secret. Well, I've been an attorney general, and I've been a prosecutor, and if you're going to put together a criminal case, you don't want to tell your targets what you're doing. But this is no longer just a criminal case. This is a public policy matter. Mueller is on TV through surrogates and through the left-wing media every 5 minutes. And he needs to understand that there has to be some sense in the American people that there's not secret conspiratorial things going on. There is no transparency here. There's no transparency. And it's the left that always demanded transparency from the right. Now we have a right to demand transparency as to what's going on.
Well, Governor, I mean, I think we do, especially when you've got Americans being eavesdropped on and spied on, and now you got informants paid by the FBI running around in presidential campaigns. And what is really troublesome to me is that the timeline that the FBI has told everybody no longer adds up. It no longer matches, which means that somebody here in the FBI, somewhere along the line, people were lying about the timeline. And now they're caught basically with the proverbial pants down because they based it on this George Papadopoulos drunken tirade, but the dates don't match up now. So what is it that led to them hiring this guy to infiltrate the Trump campaign? But look, I think you hit it on the head. All Americans have to be very wary about this because once you start letting people get surveilled with false evidence based on dossiers and you don't even tell the judge, this is just unlimited power by the federal government to do whatever they please.
Well, and let's be real clear. The American left, the far left, has made it clear their target is the last presidential election. Their goal is to upset the last presidential election. To use government organizations to try to do that is troublesome. So there needs to be oversight. They've also created this sort of weird idea that the FBI doesn't have any elected official oversight. They're, quote, independent and so on like that. Well, in the free countries, you don't have that. You have every agency of the government subject to the oversight of elected officials. Now, because they want to make Donald Trump the target, they want to separate him out. Look, we are bound here, the FBI, the White House, everybody, we are bound by the law, and we're bound by ethics. And, but to say somehow that we've got to have some star chamber that never seems to be able to tell what they're doing, or some investigative body that's supposed to be completely without civil oversight, we would never, in a free society, allow their dictatorships to do that. They have private organizations that just don't have any oversight. That's a weird development that the far left is trying to inject into American discourse.
Not good. Not good at all. Governor, let's get to North Korea, Singapore up in the air, but now the Chinese jumping up and down, Steve Mnuchin and Larry Kudlow maybe trying to get rid of the Trump tariffs in order to ease the situation with the North Koreans. Now they're saying, well, maybe we don't want to meet. You're doing joint military Navy ops with South Korea. More posturing? What do you think?
I think that your listeners have got to continue to deal with this on a global basis. We're in a global conflict, and it isn't just military. It's everything. It's economic, it's military, it's diplomatic. I'm very troubled by the way that the North Korean thing is developing, John. We have got to start to recapture the moral high ground. I'm doing a newsletter that's going to be published on my webpage, AmericanOpportunity.org, today, in which I make the point that the public relations charm offensive by the North Koreans is turning this thing against us. I don't know whether we're going to end up with this summit or not, but the point is that the North Koreans are saying we have the high ground. We're the ones that are blowing up this sort of pointless cavern that they've got up there for nuclear weapons. We're the ones that gave up these hostages who we took in the first place. We're the ones that are on the moral high ground. It is the United States that is the imperialist power. We've got to reassert where we started from here, John, and that is that it is the United States that is being put into danger by the North Koreans with their nuclear activities and their ballistic missiles, and we're not going to put up with it. And we are the ones that are acting in our own self-defense. We are not the aggressors. And until we reassert that point, they're maneuvering us into a position where we either have to fall down and surrender, or we have to attack them and look like the bad guys. Now, that's the danger that I think we're in. We need a public relations campaign of our own. One more thing. I think you got to watch the Chinese on this. Whose interest are the North Koreans really serving here? The ultimate game is to get the United States out of East Asia. That's the Chinese game. And the North Koreans are being used as a ballistic missile instrument of that policy. So we've got to recognize the big game is afoot here, and that's why the trade issues are so important, because we've got to not allow the Chinese to take advantage of us in trade, gather up money, and use that money to build their own influence and push the United States out of East Asia.
Well, and that's what's happening right now, and it looks like we're getting played because from what you said earlier, Governor, I think you're spot on with that, is like we're not the aggressors here. So, I mean, all of a sudden, the little dictator turned the tables on us and says, well, you guys are the aggressors, and I'm, the peaceful one, and so I might call this meeting off. But he's also got the president in a PR bind where now, obviously, the president, there's some level of expectations that he's going to get this done. Does that put more pressure on the president to maybe be a little more open to some of Kim Jong-un's demands?
That's the risk here, that unless we give in to some of his demands, then we look like the bad guys. Look, this thing is not working out very well here. I'm very concerned about this, John. Either it looks like we're going to have to give up and let them have their nuclear weapons, because they're now saying they're not going to give them up. They're not going to give them up, and that's the whole point of this whole exercise. The United States has said you're going to give them up, or otherwise we will take military action. And then they basically said, look, we believe that, so let's get to the bargaining table and stave off American action. Look, there's still some good news here. The United States can still apply economic power against the North Koreans. They don't have any economy. They don't have any money. They're being propped up by the Chinese temporarily. We can do that before we have to have a conflict, but I think that maximum economic pressure is going to have to be reapplied, or we're headed for a real problem here.
Well, look, this is what got the North Korean dictator to the table in the first place, right, was the economic pressure that we put on them, especially with the president cutting off any of the hard money going back there through choking off their access to Federal Reserve funds through Chinese banks in the U.S. He choked that off. They had no cash, and that's really what the issue is. So why would you ease that, right? You're not going to change that policy.
It's
without concessions.
It's the second to last chance, John. When we have got to make the economic sanctions work against these people, we must do that. It's the only other alternative to war. And I'm really worried about it. I've been worried all along that the North Koreans would not surrender the central point that threatens the United States, that is their goal, to have the threat against the United States. And unless they're prepared to give that up, we have to take action. And I don't really want us to get to that point. So I think that first they have to believe us, and second they have to change their approach. They looked like they were. Now they're backing up. They're basically saying they're not going to give up these nuclear weapons. If that happens, then the United States at that point is under jeopardy. So are the Japanese, so are the Taiwanese, so are the South Koreans. And at that point you begin to roll the United States back out of East Asia. That is not a good situation to be in for future world peace and liberty.
I've got a minute and a half. Former governor of Virginia, Jim Gilmore, Republican, with us, chairman of the 9/11 Commission. Governor, if you were advising the president right now, if you were in the Oval Office and he said to you, Governor, what's your advice? What should I do? What would it be?
Aggressive public relations. Get on the moral high ground. Make it clear to everybody in the world, including our allies, especially our allies, that we are the ones that are the non-aggressors here. We didn't start this. We didn't threaten North Korea in any way. We are defending ourselves, and we will do whatever is necessary to do that. That then liberates you to take whatever actions necessary. I would start with economic sanctions, but you got to keep the risk of military conflict in your back pocket.
But the bottom line is you want to walk out of this meeting in Singapore, if it happens, with a commitment from the North Koreans that basically their nuclear arsenal gets dismantled. I mean, that's the ultimate end game, right?
Yes, our goal here is that dismantlement, and we're willing to give them economic support in order to bring them into the Concord of Nations, which is a remarkable achievement for Kim if he goes in that direction. But if he continues to do this aggressive type of approach where he wants to maintain a threat against the United States and its allies in East Asia, then I'm not optimistic. Public relations at this point, it has to be very, very aggressive so that we make our case to the people of the world about what we're getting ready to do to protect ourselves.
So not the public relations that National Security Advisor John Bolton did a week ago, where he said it's going to be the Libyan model where Gaddafi ended up murdered and his head put on a stick in a drain pipe, right? That probably is the type of PR you want.
That's probably not a helpful thing to say because it gives the North Koreans an excuse to walk away and say, well, that's just what they want for us. We got to walk away from this. That was probably not a very well-advised statement. But the point is this, you can't allow John Bolton to be the scapegoat here. North Koreans intend to walk away if they're taking an aggressive point of view, and they'll use Bolton to once again capture the moral high ground on their side and use him as a scapegoat. The bottom line is that we have got to assert the morality and justification of our position. You don't have to get into this kind of back and forth about John Bolton. He's doing his job.
We're out of time. We want to thank former governor of Virginia, Jim Gilmore, for being with us. Great insight, great advice to the president. Hope he's tuned in. Governor, thanks for being with us. John Fredericks Radio Network. Got to go. Be right back. Keep it right here.